But if you're trying to get something that's memorable because it meant something, then you got to earn it. You got to give us those breadcrumbs. You got to set up that other stuff so we can know why this moment matters.
What's the purpose of scene, and how does scene advance a story?
Yeah, so we're going to look at each scene like mini movies, right? Each of them has a goal. Each scene connected to the next scene is what's going to get your character to reach their larger goal. And so if you're going through your screenplay and you realize you've got a scene with no purpose, then that's where you can cut. Right? So going back to revising or rewriting or second drafts, etc. If you have a scene that has no purpose and is not pushing the story forward because it's not reaching a mini goal that's going to get us to the larger goal, then you know that that's a place where you can cut.
How does a scene build tension and conflict?
Yeah. So going back to that goal, right? It needs to have the goal of doing that. But if you know what they're trying to accomplish, then you know how you can complicate it in this particular scene. And that complication can be the thing that builds the tension. So you can do that in many different kinds of ways. But like, let's say, for example, going back to the girl and her mother, and the girl is upset with her mother. So we already know that there's tension there because we already know that they're upset. So how are you going to show me in this scene where it's going to take us through the rest of it? Because it's not about the scene existing on its own. So we've built the tension by showing that they're upset with each other. Maybe they're in the middle of an argument. Maybe she does get to curse her out. Maybe she only just runs out and slams the door, right? So maybe the goal of that scene was to establish that they don't have a good relationship. But then this scene can't stand on its own. So how does this information now transfer into the rest of the film? How does it affect the next scene, which then affects the next scene and the next scene, so that we can get to wherever it is we're trying to get them to go? And let's say if our overall goal is to get them to see eye to eye or have dealt with their problems. Obviously, they won't disappear. It's 2023, so it won't be magical and all of a sudden we love each other, whatever. But they will have gotten to a place of understanding. Then now we're trying to figure out how that tension gets us there. Another way that you can build tension is if the audience knows something that the characters don't know. So maybe we know what's the issue for the young lady is that she just found out that her mom is dating someone again. So she feels like you always choose men over me. But she doesn't have the vocabulary for that. So instead, she's cussing at her and running out of the room and slamming the door. The tension is not only built from the fact that they're in conflict, but it's also because we know why she's mad and mom doesn't know why she's mad. So there are all different kinds of ways to build that tension. But even on top of building the tension, you want to ask yourself where it's going to go. We need the tension because it's going to be a trajectory for whatever's coming next in the screenplay.
What's the process of visualizing a scene and then writing it in a way that's engaging and cinematic?
Yeah, so I would look at building your scenes like you build the entire screenplay. So it's going to start in your outline. And it's going to start with knowing what it takes to get your character to reach their goal or solve their problem, right? So if I know that it's going to take therapy, more fights or whatever for our daughter and mother to get to a place of understanding each other, then now I have to plot out those scenes that get us there. And so if you're a visual person, then you might ask yourself, well, what kind of therapy setting is best for these two characters? They're already explosive. When we meet them, they're explosive. So the way that I build this therapy center or this therapist office or this grandmother or whoever it is that they're going to end up going to talk to, that may be a place where I get to add something different to the world that's a little bit more engaging and can break up the monotony of these two people yelling at each other, right? Because if we've been seeing them do that up until now, then we're going to have to shake things up a little bit. And so asking yourself what the world of that therapy office looks like. I'm not a person who needs to visualize it in the way of needing a mood board for it, right? But some people are that way. So what does the couch look like? What does the desk look like? Are they in there together? Do they go separately? What kind of therapist do they need? Right? Do they need someone who's direct? Do they need someone who's more soft? Do they need blah, 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 blah? And the more you know about all three of those characters, because they're probably going to spend a lot of time together since we've decided that therapy is going to be the thing that gets them to their breaking point, then we need to figure out how these people are going to interact with each other, because a lot of our engagement is going to come from that. So really understanding and even going back to, if they're going to be in therapy for half of the film, then that can get monotonous too. So you have to ask yourself, what goals are they reaching in these therapy scenes? What gets them to a place where we can pull out of it because maybe it's not working anymore. Maybe one of them is giving up, or maybe they think they've made it to an impasse and they don't want to go to therapy anymore, whatever it is. Figuring out how you're going to break up that monotony, but you can only do that if you know where you need them to go and if you really understand each of the characters, because they're going to make moves based on who they already are. So all of that builds the scene, right? So you can't take the scene, in my opinion, as an individual thing, as if it doesn't exist with everything else. You got to figure out how it affects everything else. And that being engaging part is going to be in your dialogue, in your action, in how they work through things and how they don't work through things and how they interact with each other. And that's the stuff that's going to make it interesting. Or like we said before, if you know that these two are, always on 10 and then they end up getting a therapist who lives on 2, then that's going to give you, it's going to already give you something cool and different to deal with in those scenes.
Or they have a therapist that eventually sides with the other, and now the other one storms out of the office and slams the door. Now they hate the other and the therapist.
And the therapist, right? And so now it's changed the story a little bit, because if I also hate the therapist, then I hate the person who is supposed to, do the work and help me to get through this. And so now we got to figure out where the story is going to go from that. And does that mean that the therapist is going to have to win the trust back? Does that mean that they're going to go, not go to therapy anymore, try to get a new therapist? What is it going to do? So all of it's going to affect the next thing.
What can a writer do to make scenes more memorable?
Make scenes more memorable. That's the hard part. I think, sometimes I watch movies and I don't come out of it remembering anything, right? But I think good dialogue will do that. Good tension will do that. Good special moments will do that. Like the movie, of course, that I can't think of the name of, but the one about the cowboys on Netflix. Like that moment when that little boy finally got the courage, because we could tell that he felt, the premise is he doesn't know his father. He grew up in a different city with his mom, and his dad had been in jail for most of his life, and maybe he'd been out for however long, but again, they didn't live in the same area, so they didn't have a relationship. Well, he's an older boy now, he's a teenager. Mom thinks you need to go be with your dad. But here's a guy I don't know. Here's a guy who I think didn't choose me, didn't want me. Here's a guy who has a relationship with all of these other cowboys, but doesn't have one with me. And we can see that throughout, scene by scene, scene by scene. So when he finally gets the courage to say, "Why don't you love me?" we've already started in a memorable scene, but that had to be earned. If he would have said that on day one, it's not memorable. You know what I mean? Like, I needed all of the conflict, all of the complications, all of the tension before that scene in order for me to get to a place where it's memorable. Or let's take something that people know really well, and let's take Dirty Dancing, right? That dance lift is not memorable just because it's a dance lift, right? So if you look at a movie like You Got Served, they're dancing all through the thing, like who's paying attention to one dance move versus the other. But in Dirty Dancing, this lift matters because we see how hard they worked on it. We know they're not supposed to be working, together in the first place, because she's from a different, she's more affluent, I guess you can say, than he would be considered. And they're probably, the dad wouldn't accept him and things like that. And it's dirty dancing, so she shouldn't be doing this anyway. She couldn't dance in the first place, right? So she had to learn just how to do the dances, period, let alone be really good at it, right? So we have all of that information. So when we get to the end and he turns to her and he's like, "You can do it," it's already a memorable scene, right? Because we had to earn getting there. So maybe the answer is you got to earn a memorable scene. They're not going to be memorable just on their own. You can do something great. You could do something funny. If you think about a comedy like Coming to America, there's all kind of memorable scenes because they're funny, right? Whether they're earned or not, right? But they're funny. But if you're trying to get something that's memorable because it meant something, then you got to earn it. You got to give us those breadcrumbs. You got to set up that other stuff so we can know why this moment matters.